We're beginning today the third Perek. Today's blot is Daf Yutes. So say the Tainus Elu, the order of these fast days. Ha'amr b'rviyah rishon. What we learned so far is as follows: if it doesn't rain straight away, then what do you call it? Only the Chidim fast. If it still doesn't, if it still doesn't rain, then the rabbis put in 13 fasts in total, 3 different brackets. First, a fast of 3, which is only the daytime, and it's like our normal fast days with none of the inuyim, none of the deprivations. And then if it still doesn't rain, there's another set of 3, but this time it's a 24-hour fast, and the number of inuyim apply, no shoes and all that. And then if that doesn't work, then there's another 7 fast days where they also they keep the store shut, and they masri, and they blow the shofar, and the special davening and so on. So the Mishnah says these fasts are only said in the first review, and the Gemara thinks first review means the first set of 3. We'll see later. The Gemara concludes the Reviyah Shani means the first period of rains, which covered the entire gamut, all 13 fasts. What about, let's say, things were growing, but then suddenly you underwent a change? And Rashi says, for example, wheat suddenly lost all of its kernels. Then masri and alemiyad. You don't wait. You don't dilly-dally. You immediately jump to the last set, all the stringencies of the last set of 7. Actually, it's a big machlekes rishonim when it says masri and alemiyad. What does it mean? Does it mean that you masriya, you blow the shofar, and you shout, and you fast as well, which is how Rashi learns and many others? Other Rishonim say no. It means just you jump straight to the shofar, but fasting you don't fast, because they say that this is a bit weaker. It's not as bad as the other ones, because we'll call this a batsaidus, which is like sort of less than a famine. But the Rishonim, those who hold like Rashi that you have to fast as well, explain that the other ones, even though the rains are delayed, if it comes later, you still get the benefit. Over here, if you don't fix it up straight away, it's far-found. You can't fix it up anymore. Therefore, even though it's not as severe, we need to deal with it straight away. It rained the first period, and then suddenly there was a hiatus of at least 40 days. Masri and Alain. Immediately you begin doing the hasram. This is the mark of hunger, which even though it's a step lower, but it's immediate. What about the rain was good enough for let's say the grains, which the Gemara explained the rain wasn't a strong rain. That doesn't benefit the trees. Or the Elon, it benefited the trees, it was a strong rain, but it didn't benefit the grains. All the zealous that work for both. Then there was not enough rain, sufficient rain to fill up all the wells. And we're talking about wells that didn't have underground water. Masina lemia. These are all urgencies, and we have to deal with it straight away. A city. If in one region it didn't rain, part of the curses, I'll make it rain on one city, but one rain. One part of the city will receive rain. So what happens then? One city does, one city doesn't. And we had before the beginning of the Masechta, that's if it could be a klola for both of them. The part that it doesn't rain is a famine. The part that it rains excessively is a floods. And then you can have that if it rains in one part, the other part doesn't rain. We said before it's not bad. That's not for otzar as a shemayim, because you can always buy from the other place. So that city, but the way the Mishnah learns over here. That city. The city that's suffering, they they fast, they do the fasting, and they want to cry out. The whole Siva said, but all the neighboring cities, they fast for Lema Siva, they don't cry out. Why are they fasting? So there's 2 opinions of showing. Rashi learns because now suddenly they have an influx of people who want to buy their goods, and therefore they cause the prices to increase and so on. Or others say because they have to empathize. They're close enough that they should feel the pain and shoulder some of the pain from the city. So out of empathy, they cry out. Rabbi Kiva says, Masri ois v'loy mesabes. No, they only cry out, but they don't fast. In other words, as Yerushalmi says, Rabbi Kiva says that we follow Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah we blow shofar, but we don't fast. And the first time I said you follow Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur you fast, but you don't blow shofar. Only on Yom we blow shofar from the Torah. In other words, they're arguing. So what is this like when we fast? Is it like Rosh Hashanah, it's Yom Hadin? Or is it like Yom Kippur that it's Yom Slicha? It doesn't matter what the din is. We are now, we're asking the Eibusher for forgiveness. The chain like was either city shares with Deborah, a city that has a plague. It was an earthquake, let's say, and the walls are caving in. Oh, you say misana. They say that's directly suffering from it. Fasts. We'll see later what the definition of a plague is. Umasras, and it screams out. V'chosi said, and all the neighboring cities misanas, they just fast for masris. They don't scream out again to feel the pain. Akiva says masrias, the other way around. They blow the shofar and they scream out. V'loy misana, but they don't fast. Eza dev, definition of a plague, eat any city, any city that produces has 500 people, and Rambam says it means only men between the age of 20 and 60. The Yotzer men and Gilul Mason Gil Yamim, if you have 3 people who died in 3 consecutive days, one per day, one after the other, Hareza dev, that's called a plague. Pachas Mekan, if less than 3 people died, or in less than 3 days, let's say 3 people died in 1 day or in 2 days, then Eza, that's not a plague, it's something happened, but it's not a plague that we have to worry that it's going to be prevalent for a long time. The following you scream out all the time. Allah Shidofan, if the wind comes, we have this in this week's parsha, and the wind comes and completely destroys the grains. The Al Hayirakan, and for getting yellow, we're talking about people that people suddenly become yellow, or we're talking about the grains themselves. Vala arba, there are different kinds of locusts. Ala arba, vala chassid. If you have this kind of locust, then it's pretty bad, because it's ominous that they're going to eat up all the grains. Vala chayoro, if a wild animal, a wild beast. Vala chered, you have murders coming through. Masinala, in all these cases, is masinala. You scream out straight away. Mipnei makam halach. It's a traveling Mak is not going to be in one relegated to one place. They are going to move about. There's an incident. The elders in Yerushalayim went back to their cities. The goes with kindness, and they decreed a fast. Al Shanida, they saw that the grains were affected, and how many grains did they have to see it being affected before they declared it? And they were alarmed, and they declared a fast day. Kemole pitana, enough to fill an entire oven. Some say the opening of an oven. Rashi's gear says mole tana. An oven. Okay, then they're going to continue. Shedafa. What happens if you have Shedafa the Ashkelon? Where was this? In Ashkelon. And the Chiddush of Rashi, Ashkelon was not part of Israel. And even so, because when it comes to the fast, they consider it as part of Israel. Another because that they triggered a fast was when they saw when wolves ate 2 little children by Eva Yadin and Transjordan. Rabbi says, not because they ate them. What actually happened then was, lav dafka they're arguing in halacha, but he's arguing what that particular episode was. The trigger was they saw a wolf roaming around and threatened the lives of little kids, and that was sufficient to cause a fast. Alayla Masim Shabbos. The following, you blow shofar on Shabbos, and you scream out on Shabbos, even though normally we don't do that. And here we're talking about this. We're talking about saying the tefillos that we had before, Vanenu, that we say by end of Slichas and so on. Al-Ir Ashi Kufu Nachim, on a city that was encircled by Goyim Munar, or a river that threatens to flood the plains, or a ship that threatens to be capsized. Rabbi Yesi says, even in these cases, all we can scream out is Lazora, asking people to come and help. Not to scream on Shabbat, because anyway, you're not guaranteed you're going to help, so why desecrate the Shabbos, the spirit of Shabbos? Shimon from Timni says, Af ala Dever. He argues, and he says that also when it comes to a plague on Shabbos, you scream out. That's a Chama didn't agree. I'll call and any tzara that we don't want to come to community. Actually, Shlektovim means it didn't come, but it's like a euphemism. It means it did come, and we don't want it to continue. Is Masri and Aleya, and all of them you scream out. Chut meroiv shamim. One thing you don't scream out is if there's too much rain, abundance of rain, because it's a good thing. Be careful, don't criticize it too much. Ma'aseh, there was an incident. They told Chayne Hamagol, and he's called Chayne Hamagol because of the story you're about to learn. And he's probably daven. They said to him, please daven for us because it's not raining. He told him he was so secure with his knowledge that his prayers will be answered that he said to guys, imagine it's going to rain, so better bring in all the earthen ovens into the house, it shouldn't disintegrate. He spali davened Shomi, didn't work, didn't rain. Also, what did he do? Og Uga, he made a circle. Va'amad b'teichen, stood right inside the circle. Va'am lefanav, and he said, Rebbeinu Shalom, v'nechu samu pnei malai, your children are relying on me. Shani kiben bayis lefanecha. They think that I am a member of your household. Nishbani b'shimcha gadol, I swear in your great name. She'ini zod mekan, I'm not stepping out of this circle. Ache terachem abanecha, have pity, show some compassion and make it rain. He's chiluk shamim, and after the rain began to rain, Amar loikach shalti, I don't want to drizzle, you're taunting us. Elagish may boy the shichon, I need to be sufficient rain that it should fill all the wells. He's chilu lieli bezaf, came down a storm. Amar loikach shalti, and that's not either. Elagish may rotzen bracha v'nedava. I wanted normal rain. Gishmei bracha, not too hard, not too light. Yodu kitikun, start to rain properly. Achiyoti Yisrael Yerushalayim had a bias. It rains that much, but normally it just continued raining, and he didn't have to go climb up the Mount Harabayis and step outside of Shalayim because there was so much water there. Now they came to Chaim Mago, said enough. Tell the Eibishter Kashem she's belau to Alem. You daven for rain. Sheyedu kachis pao sheyechlan. Daven to Eibishter enough. He said to them, go and see im nimches even hatoyin. Go and see if the even hatoyin. What's the even hatoyin? We're going to name it. Even hatoyin, where there was a stone that if people found objects and they had to be, you have to take care of it. They would come and show them. They would stand up in the stone, which is very tall, and they would declare, I found something. If you lost something, please come and tell me what it was and give me some money. So he was trying. There's different opinions of what he's trying to say to them, but he's trying to say to them, did the water reach the Even HaToyin? Not at all. And so therefore, don't worry, everything will be all right. So he down to the Eibush again, and he stopped the water. Shimon sent a message. If it wouldn't be the great Chayni, Gozrani Alecha Nidu. I will soon later story about what Chayni, how he at the end, what happened to his life. I would have put you in Chedim. What should I do? What should I do? You can sin before the Eibishter. The Eibishter doesn't mind, and he'll still curry your favor and do whatever you want. Like a child who sullies himself or sins before his father, the father still does whatever he wants. Regarding you, the Torah says, it says in the pasuk Mishnah, Yismach avicha v'imecha, your father and mother are so proud of you, and v'sogel yolado, and they rejoice over your birth. And maybe because of this thing Moshe Mashiach said, that's why Chayni Magel's life did not end in the normal way. Something about it further. That's the Mishnah further. Hayim is Anin, again, what they did was they took all the Mishnahs of this Pedic and they bunched it together and made one long Mishnah out of it, like the second Pedic. Hayim is Anin, they were fasting. What happened? They started fasting for rain, and suddenly it started to rain. So it depends. Kedim as a chama, the fast really didn't begin before sunrise. Lo yashlimu, there's no point in continuing. There's no fast really. If it was already sunrise and you started fasting, then yashlimu, too late. It's found you take it upon yourself, you continue. Rabbi Lezer says no. If it's a problem midday, you don't have to continue fasting because the fast doesn't really, even if you didn't eat, the fast doesn't really take hold until, and a lot of people don't eat in the morning. That's not called a fast. The fast is when it starts hurting, and that's already after lunch. But after lunch, you already continue fasting. I mean, you started fasting, that's it, it's too late. And the Rebbe has a whole chakira actually on Tisha B'Av. What happens if Mashiach comes in the middle of the day? Do we still continue fasting Tisha B'Av, or that's over? Do we relate it back to this din over here that says it depends if Kodim Chatzos or Achar Chatzos or not? Ma'isa Shegozu Tainis Belud, there was a story that they decreed a fast and lose the Yordalim Shom Kodim Chatzos, and it started to rain prior to noon. Rab Tarfon said, we follow Rabbi Eliezer that says, Tzu v'ichlu, go and eat, v'shtu and drink, v'asu yamtiv and make yamtiv. And that's what they did. V'yotzu v'ochlu v'shosu, they went, they ate, they drank. And Ubo ben Abayim, it came in the afternoon, the Koru Halal Hagadol. It came in the afternoon, and they all said the Halal Hagadol. And so therefore, what we see from here, that if it's before Chatzos, it's not really considered a fast day, and they have to say, yeah. So he says further, it says the Gemara, first of all, say the tiny is Elu on the Mishnah starts out that these fasts in the first Revi'ah. It sounds like the very beginning of the fast, the first set of three. But we learned the Revi'ah we learned when we had before the machlekes exactly when the rain is supposed to come. The third, Meir said the third, and then the 10th, and then the 17th. So before we learned that the 10th and the 17th, we don't really fast. That's only times to do when we start saying the same time about the Roch. It's only after the 17th goes by and it hasn't started raining. Only then do we start fasting. So how come it says Reviyah is showing already? That the Reviyah over here does not mean the same thing as the Reviyah before. Over here, this is what our Mishnah means. Say that tiny is her onward aim aside, but when is that talking about? Is man sheyotza the Reviyah is showing the first, second, third. Let's say this the 7th, the 10th, and 17th, they all come, or the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th, and the 17th, they all come with it, they're all called together the Reviyah Shayna, the first period. If it came down the first Reviyah, the Zara they planted, but something didn't grow. Inam it grew, the Chazar v'nishtanu, or it changed, it say withered away. Masriyin alemiyad. And you don't wait, you don't dilly dally. Immediately you call out. Aron Nachman Dafkin Nishtan Dafkin was a physical change. Aval Yavshu was just dried loy. If it just dried, you don't have to. There's not such an urgency. Or either it's not such an urgency. That's one way of learning pshat, or other showing like Rashi here, or not. It's too late. We learned in the end of bracha. There's a thing called Tzulah Shav. If you heard screams coming from your house or coming back from overseas, and you walked into your city and suddenly you hear screams and you recognize the voice, and you say, I wish the screams are not coming from my house. It's a Tzulah Shav. It's too late. Whoever's screaming is screaming already. The tzara is already there. You can't say, I wish it's not coming from my house. Same thing here. Once it dried up, it's too late. What's the rain going to help? That's how Rashi learns here. Other Rashi learn exactly the opposite. That don't give up at all. Such an urgency. Pshita, even if it dried, on the outside can still grow. Pshita, right now, let's look at Rashi. Pshita isn't obvious. It says clearly Nishtanu Tanan says if it changes, if it dried up, it's fafan. We're talking about a case the chiddush here is it dried up when you say fafan, but then suddenly a shoot started coming out. I thought akad milsi that proves that it still has some life to there, and therefore we should continue worrying. Maybe screaming all that. Maybe we can save it. Commercial, and you can't salvage it. It's nothing. It's just like the remnants. Last one, a person was dying, and after he passes away and jumps around, the same thing here. It's nothing. It's too late. Okay, likewise, there's a hiatus of 40 days between one in the rain and then we start fasting. Mamakas batzoides, you call it, this is called a batzoides. What's batzoides? We know about a famine. What's batzoides? This leads to not a famine, but to shortages. Amar Nachman says that Hanara, let's say if one river is, let's say, dried up, Benara, Betsurasa, that's called a shortage. Medinasa, one country, one whole region, dried up, is Kafna, that's a hunger. In other words, if one river dried up, you can always go, down the river and bring food there. You can bring plenty of food. So it's not really just a shortage. But if it's done, all the rivers of that area dried up and you have to go to another country, since you cannot bring it by water, you're going to have to bring it by mules. And then obviously it's limited to how much freight you can bring in. And that is a kafir. That can lead to a famine. That's one pshat. Another pshat is, we're talking about the water itself. If only one river, dried up, you could have other sources of water. But if all the rivers dried up, then it's a problem. Rav Chanina said, saw bisela. Another difference is, let's say you can buy one saw of wheat for a seller, which is expensive, but it's plenty of grains. It just became very expensive. That's also that's like a shortage. People can't afford to buy as much, but it's still available. Let's say the price, fell down, collapsed. Now you can buy 4 saw for one seller. It just isn't sufficient. Kafna, that's a famine. Bit hard to understand if there's a big shortage of grains, how can the price collapse? I mean, it's not the laws of supply and demand that we know today, according to all of these formulas. Unless, even though that's how everyone learns pshat, l'shchicha means that the grains are not available. Maybe l'shchicha is talking actually money. Money is very, very cheap. The prices are very, very low, but very few people have actual cash. That's what l'shchicha is. But this is all talking about when the money is cheap, we'll pay the vehicle and food is expensive. At least you can buy. If money is very, very expensive, you don't have money. You pay the zel, you don't wait because you don't have access to money. What's the difference? What the prices? Rabbi Yechon says, I remember I remember that 4 soim was the seller, which is the price that it should be by the fishy. And I remember, nevertheless, even though it's so cheap, there's so many people, their stomach swelled, who were dying from hunger. Nevertheless, no one had access to money. No one had money. So money was a shortage. But maybe so if the problem then is Rabbi Yechon is saying exactly the same thing as before, Shchicha is talking about money, what's Rabbi Yechon adding? That's why perhaps everyone learned Shchicha before talking about, but it was not available. It's just hard to understand. If it's not available, why would the price collapse? Yordu litzmach in Avalei Ilah. What do you mean the rain was beneficial to the grains, but it was not beneficial to the trees? What does that mean? Says the Gemara, I understand how was it beneficial for the grains. The rain came, but calmly. It didn't come down strong. Okay, it doesn't benefit the trees. Le'ilan benefits the trees. I understand the asir came down strong, but not slow. So therefore, it didn't really benefit the grains. Then there's another case where it benefited trees and the grains. I said as well, the rain came first strong and then ordinarily. It was sufficient rain, insufficient rain, so therefore it didn't fill the wells. Tanya says that this that it says in Hebraism. Sufficient water went into the wells, but it didn't benefit the trees or the grains. How is that possible? How can that be? It wasn't just strong rain, it was like a hurricane. It was very, very, very fierce. And even the trees didn't benefit from it. But on the other hand, you filled up with water, the reservoirs filled up. Tanabami learned. Masri and Alaylanas, we shout out for the trees, even the Pesach, even because Pesach time, it's not too late for the rain to come down to benefit the trees. When it comes to the wells for drinking water, I feel the Pesach, even in the middle of Sukkot. Even though Sukkot, interesting, Rashi says even middle of Sukkot in order to feed the crops, irrigate the crops, and to feed the animals. Because the next line it says, why does it say drinking water? Because the next line says about kulan, if they have no water to drink, other waters masin lemiyad. Then it's an emergency, and you have to scream out straight away. What do you mean when you say straight away? What do you mean exactly? Monday, Thursday, Monday, and all of these instances we said before, you do not shout out only in their own region, only in their own kingdom. If there's no rain, or the boilers are empty, only that region they scream out. The askara, when it comes to diphtheria, sometimes diphtheria is in the throat and it's a killer. If it involves killing people, then you shout out, and over here you fast as well. But let's say it's diphtheria, but not in the throat and other parts, which just makes you sick. We don't shout out and we don't fast and all that. So some of the Rishonim say that this is different than a deva. A deva is a plague and people die for different reasons, but all happening at the same time. That's what we mean by deva. Here, if you have one sickness that is rampant, the reach for some other Rishonim, right? If you have one sickness that is rampant, then the rules that we said before about 3 people dying 3 consecutive days and 500 people in the city, we'll see tomorrow, all that kind of stuff doesn't apply. If there is a virus that's running right through the community and the Nebuch taking lives away, everyone has to fast. Surprising that nobody fasted. Nobody declared fast days for COVID. We had so many korbanos over the last 2 years, so many. Okay, and Umasrian al haguboy, there's a certain kind of locust which is called guboy, that this is even more dangerous than arba and chasel. This one here you don't wait around, the choshu. And this one here, you just see a couple of them. It's an ominous sign that there are many more coming in train. He says even a chagav, the most standard locust, also we have to worry about. Like a grasshopper. What am I learned? Masrin alilanas. We shout out on the trees. You have Shemitah. Shemitah, the year, it's hefker. Everything has to be hefker, its own list. So when do we scream if there's not enough rain? Only during the 60th, not in the Shemitah year. What's the difference if it rains, it doesn't rain? You don't care, because Shemitah anyway, it's hefker. And but when it comes to drinking water, of course, even in the year Shemitah, we need to scream out. Shbag says no. Even in Shemitah, we have to scream out on trees. You know why? Because even though it's hefker, people still eat the produce. It's available for all poor people. The poor can eat from it. Tanya Ida, we learned elsewhere. Masin Ali London B'Shashakua, we scream on the trees for the rest of the years of Shemitah, except Shemitah, Alabajal Ma'adah for the B'Shvis. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says in this version, Af Ali Lonas Masin Ala Svichin B'Shvis. He says in this version here that we scream out not some of the trees, but the things Svichin are things that grow wild on their own without any planting. Everybody can eat. Tanya Amra Blazim Parta. Miyoim Shechorav Beis Hamikdash. Since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Nasu Gishamim Tzimukin. Rain became much tougher to come by. It's no longer the way it used to be. La'elam. Yes, Shana, you have years. Shigishmem Reuben, plenty, ample rain. The yes, Shana Shigishmem Watin. There are years that there is insufficient rain. Yes, Shana Shanish Gishmel Yoidus Mana, the rain rains in the right time. But yes, Shana Shengishmel Yoidus Mana. Sometimes rain doesn't occur in the right time. Shana Shigishmel Yoidus Mana. What do you mean rain that comes in the right time? Lamahodaim, what's it compared to? It's compared to the following. It's compared to the is compared to an Eved. The best time to give him is the food for the week on Sundays. He can prepare properly. The doughs are baked properly. Eaten properly. That's good. The rain comes late, so everything's in a rush. What's it compared to a slave? Gives him everything on a Friday. Go get ready for Shabbos. The dough is not 100% baked. When you can't eat it properly, okay, but at least you get something. Shana shegishmem rubi is an abundant supply of rain. Eved is compared to an eved. Shenosan loy rabbi panasosai, that is, his master gave him his panasa b'vasachas all in one go, and that's a blessing. You know why? Because when you put things through the mill, there's always something, the residue that doesn't go. But it makes no difference how much you put in. There's always the same amount of residue. It fills whatever it is, the spaces there, the cavities there, and that's it. It doesn't fill it, take any more, and that go. So if you have a bunch, if you only put in a cabinet that the chaim takes a certain amount, and that takes the same amount, no matter how, regardless of how much you put through the mill, and therefore you'll gain so much more. Okay, also we find another thing is Isa, when you need the dough, it gets stuck on the board and everything else. And once it fills all the cracks on the board, no matter how much dough you put on there, you always lose the same amount. It's the same thing again. You'll benefit because you'll have much more dough to take back with you. But Isa, Shana year a year that the rain is not so plentiful. What is it compared to? A slave. It's compared to a slave that his master gave him a little bit at a time. If it only rains a little bit, so every time you put it through the mill, you lose the same amount. You lose every time a certain amount, you get back much less. The dough, same thing. Every time you lose a certain amount. So if you go doing bits and grabs, you lose so much more. There's a lot of rain, like a person who is now needing some cement. A lot of water, it forms cement straight away. You don't lose really any water immediately. It becomes, turns to cement. Then you have very good, cement. You have a little bit of water. What happens to the first water you put in there? So you get the next water. It dries up. It gets coated. It becomes dry. You lost all that water. In other words, having ample supply of rain is very important. This is a story that will start and goes into tomorrow's